Healthy Women launched WomenTalk as part of our live webinar series to bring together healthcare professionals and women to connect about their health. Now more than ever, we know how important it is to take care of our health and how impactful it is to share our health journeys. We are proud to present current and up-to-date information brought directly to you from guests who are top healthcare providers, researchers, experts, and leading professionals in their fields. At Healthy Women, we bring you authentic, engaging, and personal stories by women for women. Join the conversation today by asking questions live in the comments section. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of WomenTalk, the Future of Menopause. At Healthy Women, we're here for you. We are, and we believe in supporting you to age smart and age well. That's why we have convened more than 13 advocacy organizations to create the Aging Smart, Aging Well on National Action Plan, which is a benchmark survey to understand the full blueprint of gaps that lie in women's midlife healthcare and the ways that we can bridge them. Today, we have two very, very special guests on our show who are champions in changing the way that we look at aging. I am so excited to have the style maven and CEO of State of Menopause, Stacy London, and the creator of the Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause, Omisade Burney-Scott, here today to discuss the future of menopause. Welcome, ladies. I am so happy to have you here.
So honored. Thank you so much for having us, Beth.
Oh, yeah. Love it, love it, love it. And we're going to dive right in with some of our first questions.
Great.
So this is both Omi and Stacy. Both this question is for both of you. As agents of change, what have you learned about entering menopause? And how have you overcome any challenges? Who wants to go first?
Oh, Omi, you go first.
Oh my goodness, I was thinking, oh my God, rock, paper, scissors, Stacy. I think the thing that I really want to impress upon people that I absolutely believe is that menopause is such a dynamic experience. Like, it is not a one size fits all. It is really complex. It's really it's tricky. It has all to do with who you are, your identity, your context, the culture, everything. And so much of what I heard about menopause before I actually was a menopausal person felt really, really limited. And it felt like I was in this like observation deck and I was looking down at it. And I didn't have a sense of not just what was going to happen physically, but also what would happen to me emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Like, what is the cultural context, the social political context? It's so much more than we ever really understand. And unfortunately, I felt like I had to get there to understand it. And so part of what I'm trying to do now is not have people who are coming behind me or even people who are experiencing it right now who are in my peer footprint to feel like they're isolated and alone and kind of like reaching out in the dark and trying to figure out what exactly is happening. Like, is this menopause? Is what I'm experiencing, is it connected to menopause? What can I do? How can I take care of myself? And I know for me personally, I think of this as a wildly transformative process. You will not be the same when you come out on the other side of menopause, nor should you be, nor is that a bad thing. And so I do think that the journey, though, to get from one kind of iteration of yourself to the next can be really fraught. And so you deserve really good information, you deserve support, and you deserve a lot of care. And so that's what I would offer up as kind of like my reflection, because I think I had that intermittently in a lot of different ways, and I know a lot of people don't.
I love that. Stacy?
I completely agree with Omi. I think one of the biggest issues is this gap between not enough education around the issue itself. Understanding that menopause is bio-individual, right? I mean, bio-individuality plays a huge role, as Omi was saying. It is not going to be the same for each person as they go through this incredibly natural transition. But I think our ignorance around it and our generational shame around it has kept it stigmatized and in the dark and very silent, and we're embarrassed. And of course we feel isolated because we don't feel like talking about this. We equate it with aging and some arbitrary cultural past your expiration date. And of course, this is a difficult way. If we're going into the idea of, let's say, chronological menopause, right? Arriving at this as you would in midlife as sort of the gateway to middle age. Well, we have to take our whole idea of the middle age out of the Middle Ages, right? This is a very vibrant, and as Omi was saying, just absolutely dynamic time in our lives. And it would be one thing if we were, retiring and dead by 65. Now we're looking at a drop in birth rates. We are going to have to work a lot longer, and we're going to live a lot longer. So if you're in menopause, let's say early 50s, you may have anywhere from 30 to 50 years in front of you. That is a lifetime. So instead of looking at menopause as this kind of tragic ending of our biological use value, we need to start modernizing our perspective on aging. I mean, what a gift it is. And as Omi was saying, this idea of a transformative experience, change, can feel scary if you don't understand change, but it can feel transformative if we understand that's what we're going through. We have the tendency to talk about menopause in very negative terms because there are challenges, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, associated with a change in our really holistic identity. But that doesn't mean that we can't take that, reframe it, and reclaim ourselves at this stage of life. Just what you were saying, Beth, this idea that we take care of everybody, this is the moment where you can refocus on yourself, where you must pause, take a step back, and refocus on what you want and where you want to be, because this is a very different time of our lives than it's ever been for any generation before us.
That's right.
I couldn't agree more. And I feel like it's not our mother's menopause. Like,
No.
we have the power to change it, right? So thank you both for that. I love both of your answers and insights. Question 2, again, for both of you, Omi and Stacy. I've heard that the two of you are part of each other's menopause support system, which I love. Tell us more about that and how women listening can create their own menopause support system.
I'm gonna let you go first.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to talk about this. Yes. I consider Omi such a great friend, and we were very fortunate. I have to give credit where credit is due. I have a chief of staff and head of partnerships, Rohan Sheth, who is one of the most emotionally intelligent people I have ever met in my life. And he met with Omi and called me and said, "You need to meet this woman stat, like right now. You are going to jive no matter what. You are going to fall in love with each other." I don't think he was wrong at all. Like, not even for a nanosecond. I heard Omi's voice and I was like, I feel so much better about life. And what's developed is not just this friendship that is around menopause, although I really love having that as the bedrock of how our friendship started, because there was a study done, and I'm sorry, I can't quote which study, but this was told to me that out of, let's say, 100 women, 20% were willing to discuss menopause. And of those 20%, 100% of them wanted to talk to a friend, more than a significant other, more than a doctor, because we trust in our friends to hold on to, to make space for us, to hold space for us when we are experiencing something challenging and confusing and potentially very powerful. But you need to have a support system that is empathetic and understands, may not necessarily have gone through this, but understands the challenges surrounding it. So much better if you do have a friend who's going through it with you, or to be your menopause mentor and went through it already, right? These were all things that Omi and I have been discussing. So our friendship really was built on this shared experience of menopause, the frustration of having to figure this stuff out for ourselves, our advocacy work really being about, well, nobody should feel uneducated. Nobody should feel isolated. Everybody should know how to ask for the support that they need. We spend a lot of time in menopause talking about destigmatization and normalization, but Omi and I talk about optimization, and we talk about contextualization. How do we make menopause part of the average conversation in any female organ reproductive health conversation? If you know about periods and pregnancy, you should know just as much about menopause. And just in having that conversation, I don't feel alone. I don't feel alone. I can like swing my hair and touch Omi's shoulder and know she's got me. You know what I mean? There is something so powerful about having a shared language of shared experience. It is what makes community so essential. And I just want to say that my relationship with Omi has been even more important to me because I can only sympathize with other women of color or the non-binary folks. These are things that I can sympathize with, but I cannot walk in those shoes and empathize. And there's so much when you look at menopause about the iniquity, a stigmatized topic that all marginalized groups belong to. And the more marginalized, the worse this experience can be. So Omi has taught me so much about the way in which we need to look at this holistically. This is not a middle-class, cisgender, heteronormative white woman problem who doesn't want to have hot flashes or doesn't want to sweat in her silk blouse. This is a moment of transition that 52% of the population is going to experience. We need to learn, even amongst ourselves, how that experience is different for each of us and how we can amplify and lift each other up.
I really did not anticipate that Stacy and I would connect in the way that we did. You know, sometimes you connect with someone and you're like, oh, this is cool. Like, of course I would want to have a great conversation with Stacy. And I do also give a lot of credit to Rohan because he and I had such a beautiful, honest, earnest conversation. And he was like, you really do need to connect with Stacy. And I was like, that sounds great. And literally the first time we had a conversation, I was like, this feels different. And you can tell when you're connecting with someone and you're like, oh, we're going to do good work together, but it's going to stay at a certain level. And then when you connect with someone, you're like, I think we're going to be friends. And the friendship piece, not only menopause was a connector to facilitate this friendship developing in an earnest way, but it also helps us as two people who are also running our own businesses talk to each other in different ways that folks don't always understand. And I'm sure you feel that same way, Beth, around Healthy Women. Absolutely. You know, it is one thing to be out here holding space for conversation to happen. It's another thing to actually be running an entire organization and trying to figure out different ways to make that organization accessible, to be resonant, to stay a bit of ahead, you know, be on the vanguard, to be a bit of ahead of the curve and kind of look out onto the menopause ecosystem and landscape and say, you know, we need to connect the dots between this and this too. And this is a whole gap here. And so while Stacy and I connect because we have a similar generational footprint, I think we have similar dispositions in terms of our nerdiness and the way we think about things and our quirkiness. And I also like to think of myself as a style maven. Stacy told me I was. So I will own that.
You totally are.
I will own that. But there's also, we have shared experiences of having parents pass away, around partnership, around our own journey with our mental health, you know, and grief. And then there are ways in which we are different, and that those differences are not celebrated. Those differences are affirmed. Those differences are respected. Those differences are like held up as a real tangible thing. Like, I know that when I'm talking to Stacy, Stacy's looking at me in my full personhood, and I'm looking at Stacy in her full personhood. And I think that's what I would like to see happen throughout the menopause multiverse when we are talking about there's so many different ways that people are coming at this topic. And if we could all see each other fully, what an amazing transformation our culture would have around it.
Oh my, you ladies are awesome. No, I couldn't agree more. And how awesome for you both to be able to connect and just have such a great support system and friendship. So
our
now
friend Heather is like, I like to think of us as a triumvirate. Our friend Heather
I
lives
do
in
too.
Chicago, and she wrote they wrote What Fresh Hell Is This?
That's right.
And I'll like to be very careful, especially when talking about menopause, not to screw up pronouns.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about menopause, this is, there are a lot of non-gender folks who are going to experience menopause.
That's right.
And we can't keep talking about it as a female or woman problem, right? We really have to talk about this as people.
That's
Right.
So I just caught myself when I was talking about Heather's pronouns, but that has been very challenging because when you are talking about menopause and you're already talking about a topic that isn't widely discussed or openly accepted, there's even more stigma attached to it.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I even think for us too, right? Like our ages, like that wasn't openly discussed.
No.
So this is something new that we're learning and embracing and making sure again that we're going to change how this is addressed moving forward. So I love the fact that we're all on the same page and kind of putting a stake in the ground now that this is the time for change, right? Like we are going to change it. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. We are going to change it.
Yeah, no question. And I really do think this is again another opportunity for a relatively new vertical in terms of the commercial enterprise of menopause. This gives us as a nascent kind of sector of business. This gives us the opportunity to truly shape the ethics and the ethos of this business.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So and that requires insight that's coming from younger generations.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Because we want them to be part of the change. I just think it's not just, it has to be all part of the change. And we need to, and we know if we educate younger people, they embrace change and it's going to be normal, right?
And they want it. They want it now. So we, one of the things that we do with the Black Girls Guide is we intentionally have intergenerational conversations.
I love that.
That's been a hallmark of our programming since we started in 2019. And it was very interesting. Initially, I was like, I'm not sure if millennials or even Gen Zs would want to have these conversations. And they were like, no, we do.
We do.
We absolutely do. And so we've been intentional around hosting these intergenerational story circle opportunities for folks to talk about how your body transforms, because it doesn't matter if you're 55 or 25, you are experiencing transformation in your body.
That's
right.
And it's constant, right? I mean, this transformation, we have hallmarks. And this is part of, when we talk about female reproductive organs, like, oh, the miracle of giving birth. Our hormonal system is so complicated, right?
It is.
This is why we have been taught. My friend Latham Thomas said this, and I was on a panel with her, and I've not been able to let go of this thought. It's just stuck with me that as women, we have been taught, certainly in Generation X and before, boomers and before that, right? We have been taught to feel unsafe in our body. We have been taught subliminally, unconsciously, this is systemic. We have been taught to be afraid. And we've also been taught to judge. So if you're not having the perfect pregnancy, or you don't know what happens after pregnancy, or if you are experiencing issues with infertility, we are made to feel like failures. We are using words like performance, failure, success. No wonder menopause is such a loaded conversation.
That's right.
It's on the heels of the way that we treat a very, binary gendered society, truly the way that we view women. You add women and any non-binary folks to that category, we all become, through the lens of the patriarchy, aging is pretty much the worst thing that can happen to you.
The devaluing that happens to you as you age based on a patriarchal or misogyny framework, that's just so frightening, right? So it's like, I already know with all the messages that I have received from society that I'm not necessarily considered valuable. And then I know that an aging body is a devaluing body in the society. And so how do you give people the opportunity to reclaim their body sovereignty? Like, what does that
body
mean?
Sovereignty.
Right. Sonia Renee Taylor gifted me with that language. And, Sonia has this amazing platform, The Body Is Not an Apology. And she was like, what we're talking about ultimately, whether you're talking about menstruation, whether you're talking about fertility, whether you're talking about menopause, whether you're talking about gender affirmation, is body sovereignty. That you, Beth, Stacy, Omi, we determine our body sovereignty, not the state, not culture, not our community, not our families. We decide that.
I love it.
And what's so, I mean, look at how important this conversation is right now with the overturn of Roe, with what's happening in Iran. I mean, just the idea of hair as identity is so essential. And this idea that this woman was killed for trying to own her body sovereignty is absolutely astounding to me. That's what we're dealing with in 2022.
Right.
You know, people tell me that they're frustrated with the pace at which the sort of conversation and education and commerce around menopause is happening. And I'm like, it's happening faster than I would, it's not happening as fast as I would like, but it's happening way faster than I thought it would. At this stage, when we look at all of the things that we are fighting against in terms of being marginalized, in terms of being told we don't have control over our own bodies, this is a 100-year-long fight, right? We really have to very much think about how we create aging to be empowering, how we can change or at least shift perspective, right? We give value to things. They don't inherently have them. So we can decide, people say to me, menopause, oh, it's such a terrible word. We should change the word. I'm like, no, we just need to change our attitude towards the word. The word didn't do anything to us. You know what I mean? So it's like, how can we take these things and move them forward in a way that is going to empower us, not weaken us, not make us more afraid to have body sovereignty, but really to own it, to empower us, and to make this stage of life something truly valuable personally, not culturally. I mean, the needle will move if each individual starts to own their own value. But that's how we move culture, right?
That's right.
That's how we change value.
That's right. You got two passionate people on this conversation with you.
You know what? I'm loving it. I am so loving it because we are going to, I truly believe we are going to move the needle. We are going to move the needle on this. So I'm going to jump to question 4, Stacy. Knowing your business, State of Menopause, what has your experience been with natural remedies like CBD?
I am a huge proponent of CBD, and not all CBD. Some CBD can be snake oil, and you will. There are certain things that I don't quite understand the use value for CBD. CBD has somehow entered the beauty space, which to me is not its best value. Right? There are different, and you again have to work with CBD a little bit. You will never get high. Sorry, guys. There's less than 1% of THC in any CBD product by law, but in CBD, there are also other cannabinoids. CBD is fantastic for pain. It's great for anxiety, and it is good for sleep. Those are things that if you may have to take different dosages internally. I am a big fan of gummies when it comes to I love Sleepy Bear. I love Lord Jones. You need to determine what the weight, how many grams you would take. I take different amounts for anxiety than I do for sleep, right? Our CBD oil, and we have a CBD suppository, vaginal suppository, those things are either to retain moisture, like our vaginal insert is for it's a humectant, but it also stops pain, right? It relaxes the vaginal wall, in which case painful sex is less of an issue. Our CBD oil, which also approved for vulvar use, is really what I say I use for every muscle fatigue or joint pain that I have.
Absolutely.
These elbows, shoulders, doesn't matter. There is true scientific evidence around the use value in CBD. When somebody says to me, oh, CBD in my face cream, that's just me. I don't know what the research is on that, but I'm very clear on the research around pain and anxiety and sleep. And then I would also just say CBN is another cannabinoid that is wonderful specifically for sleep. There's another cannabinoid called CBG, which is also really, really good for energy. So we are really starting to look at drugs, right? That's what I mean, CBD, things like that. Even psilocybin, How to Change Your Mind. Michael Pollan wrote the book, and now it's a Netflix special. There is something about plant medicine, instead of looking at this as drugs, as plant medicine, that is really unlocking a lot of secrets of health that we were told, no, you never take drugs, you only take prescription medication. Now we're finding out prescription medication could be much worse for us.
Right.
And so I really do recommend doing your homework with CBD. The one other place that I would recommend, aside from what we sell, is a company called Cure Crate, which they vet the best CBD companies and they do subscription boxes every month. You can write in and say, I loved this tea. I hated this tincture. I love this oil. I don't want this gummy. And they customize your boxes for you to receive one every month. And if they come up with a new supplier, they'll say, hey, do you want to try this new gummy? So it's a really wonderful introduction to CBD products. And also they work with the Prisoner Project so that a lot of folks
percentage goes to that.
Who suffered, a lot of particularly Black and brown men who suffered for selling a joint or marijuana are now benefiting from this CBD company because we have a lot of people running around making money off the backs of people who were incarcerated for this very same thing.
And no one should be in jail for selling weed.
No one should be in jail. I agree.
Can I add something to that really quickly, Beth, before we shift gears? And I maybe you will also appreciate this as a registered nurse. I know that when I was pregnant with both my boys, there were natural teas that were offered to me to support me through my pregnancy.
Right.
And I, as a person who breastfed both my boys, again, there were natural teas that helped me with my milk production and things like that. So you cannot tell me that the wisdom that we have around that midwifery wisdom, that nursing wisdom, that nurse practitioner wisdom does not exist for menopause. And so when Stacy's talking about this CBD, I'm like, of course this would work for us. And I think that there are more plant allies out there for us to investigate that is not in opposition to HRT, is not in opposition to bioidenticals, it's not in opposition to anything that you might use to provide yourself with relief.
Absolutely.
Every person who is experiencing menopause should have a menu of options where they can weigh their options and say, this would work for me. This did not work for me at all, because we're all not the same.
One size doesn't fit all, Omi. Just like you said, one size doesn't fit all. We need options.
It doesn't even fit most. It's not even one size fits most. Omi makes such an important point, and I really think that this is so important. One of the problems in not having an educated consumer base is really that you don't know what options are available to you. And aside from CBD, things like rhodiola or ashwagandha mushrooms, these are things that are clearly helpful that are not regulated by the FDA and are not acknowledged by the medical system because, drug companies don't make money off of it, right? These are natural remedies.
Alternative medicines that are available and have been around for years.
Absolutely.
And now, I love it. And you had me at sleep, Stacy. You had me at sleep. So I'm going to jump to question number 5. And Omi, this one's for you.
Okay.
What do you think is the number one change that needs to happen in order for women to have the support that they need during menopause? I know.
Well, that's a really easy question. Thanks so much, Beth, for that question.
I was going to say, we're going to be here all day.
Okay, let me try to be specific. The first thing is important. Okay, this is easy. Here we go. I think the most important thing is for that person's personhood to be fully affirmed and seen. So for me, I am a cis hetero Black woman who lives in the American South. I'm a 7th generation. Sorry, my nose ring just came out. I'm a 7th generation North Carolinian. So that means when I'm experiencing menopause, it's my experience. I also have had so many conversations with people who don't identify the same way, right? With younger people who experience menopause because they had cervical cancer, or they had ovarian issues, or they were having gender affirming surgery and had a full hysterectomy so they could be more in alignment with their gender identity and who they have always been. And so I think that the biggest thing that we need to do is to make sure when you are talking to a person, don't assume that you know who they are. Don't assume you know the context of their experience. Don't assume that you understand what they're going through. Ask them. So I always say, let me know who you are, how you want to be identified, and tell me about your experience, because you're the expert of your experience. And ultimately, I believe you. And I think that that is important for folk who are doing this type of work like we're doing around education. If we're providing services and products, if we're providing relief, advocacy, policy, you start with believing the person who is talking to you about their experience.
No question. And really, that's even in the commonality of menopause.
Absolutely.
The idea of affirming one person's experience while
That's
listening
right.
to them, I think, is the building block for this entire
For all of it.
movement.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
I couldn't agree more. I do think that is the building block for this. And I think the importance, everything that you all are saying, it's like listening, right? Finding someone who's going to listen and listen to you, right? Because again, everyone is so individual, and there's some women that may not have any experience or any symptoms at all, and go through it and not even realize that, until she stops having her period, that she was going through menopause. And then there's that have a different journey. So understanding, I'm just thinking about everything, all the smart things that you women have said. It's the importance of understanding your options. It's the importance of having a healthcare provider that you can trust. And I think one thing that we teased out when we first met was if that healthcare provider is not listening to you or you don't feel comfortable, there's other options, right?
Go elsewhere.
Vote with your feet. Vote with your feet.
Vote.
That's
That was it.
That's right. Vote with your feet.
Vote with your feet. There are three things that I offer people when they say, Omi, I feel like my healthcare provider is not listening to me. I'm really frustrated. They're very terse or short with me. I said, three things. Go to your doctor's appointment with 3 things you want to ask them and say that when you get there. Listen, I have 3 things that I would like to ask you about. Do we have time for this conversation? If they say no, we're kind of booked, we've got a lot of people, you say, okay, can we schedule a follow-up? Because I need to ask you these questions, because these questions are a priority for me, for you to be able to help me get the relief that I desire. So that's the first thing. Second thing, if you're not that person, because not everybody is that person. Not everybody feels like they have that agency or that voice or they're comfortable in doing that. It still might be confusing or hard to do. Bring a friend. I go with my younger sister to all of her doctor's appointments because that's not her thing. She doesn't always feel comfortable. And sometimes in the midst of going to the doctor, she has really, really bad debilitating asthma. She's actually not in the headspace to ask a question, nor should she have to be. So when I go with her to the doctor and she's struggling and the doctor says, la, 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 la. And I say, Georgette, do you understand what the doctor just said? And she'll say, no. And I'm like, can you reframe that, please? Right. Having a friend, having a person with you to support. And then that third thing, vote with your feet. Now, I know that our insurance system and medical system in the United States is really complex. And so that's dependent upon if you have insurance. If you're underinsured or uninsured, you may not have that flexibility. So you may have to try to figure out how to navigate inside of what is available to you and refer back to those first 2 things of thinking about how do I come to my appointment more prepared and how do I bring somebody with me who can support me in that appointment.
I know that's such great advice. And I'm so glad that you brought that to the forefront today, Omi, because I remember you were talking about it yesterday during our call, and I loved that. I loved the 3, and I couldn't agree more with bringing a friend or a relative to your healthcare provider appointment, because even if sometimes you just aren't listening, like you're just not, it's not registering. So I love all your suggestions to make that visit as successful as it can be. And a question for both of you, both Stacy and Omi, what would you like to see change? If you had your magic wand, what would the future of aging in midlife menopause look like to both of you?
Oh, we would start. Okay, here's my magic wand. You ready?
I love it.
Bippity boppity boo.
Bippity boppity boo. We would start talking about aging as a natural process that is dynamic when we're little. As children, we would start to demystify this process, that every step of the way you would be talking about your body is changing again. And isn't it marvelous? And isn't it interesting? And if you're being challenged, isn't it a miracle? And if you're being challenged by the way that your body is changing, here, we can support you through that. So I would absolutely begin this conversation earlier. One of the things that Stacy and I have talked about is I've been reimagining my menopause origin story, where I used to say that it kind of like came online for me and I had an awareness in my late 30s, early 40s. But actually my menopause story came online when I started my menstrual cycle, which was October 31st, 1979, right?
So your anniversary is coming up.
My anniversary is coming up.
I can't believe you know the date. I just know I was 11.
Because it was Halloween. It was Halloween, and I was just, trying to be prepared.
There you go.
Right, exactly. So I will celebrate my menstruation, anniversary, but that is also my menopause origin story. So if we were able to have this conversation every step of the way, we have several liminal experiences in our lifetimes. Several liminal experiences. Yeah. The last one, when we make the transition from this physical life into the next, that's what we think is the last one. I don't know if it is or not. But what I do know is from the moment you take your breath, first one to the last one, you're going to go through transformation. And if we did a better job of helping people honor their body, understand their body, take care of their bodies, not feel shame about their bodies, then we would have a whole different landscape of people out here in the world feeling more empowered to be exactly who they are.
And that is through, look, we're talking about a society that is still being ruled by this kind of patriarchal lens.
Right. True.
And so the whole idea around aging doesn't come from nowhere.
Right.
It's sociobiological. I mean, we still have caveman software for brains, right? I mean, this is, we prize youth and we think youth is beautiful because it's equated with fertility. Correct. This idea is antiquated in and of itself. It's function only. It has nothing to do with cultural perception and true social value. So, there are lots of people who decide not to have kids, who don't want kids, who couldn't have kids. That doesn't make them any less valuable in our society.
No,
so the way that we look at this menopause origin story, right, really should be this idea of contextualization over your lifetime. What does your hormonal health look like? And the most important thing is, I wish that we could learn not to devalue experience, right? We tend to think as we get older, we're less valuable, right? But this idea that you have countries in the world where age is so revered, right? I mean, look at Japan, where some of the oldest people in the world live. This idea that age and experience gives you a kind of earned intelligence that cannot be earned any other way than the more days you're on the planet. We need to honor that. We need to elevate that so that there really is something about kind of the elders and wisdom that does not get lost. This is how stories were passed on for generations. We need to be changing the cultural temperature of what it means to age, and also really taking control of our health early enough that we are able to be independent and have our freedom as we age, right? All we talk about is how the body starts to break down. Well, what can we do so that when we're in our 90s, we feel like we're in our 50s? That is possible. And it is about really understanding and controlling not just our own narrative, but the narrative around aging.
So, Stacy and Omi, we are going to change. We are going to change how we look and perceive aging.
Absolutely.
And we are going to make sure that women start prioritizing their lives. And we're going to embrace what we know about aging and aging smart, because the scientists and researchers have made great strides in making sure that preventative, we can prevent some of the things that our mothers and grandmothers went through and our aunts, right? So we are going to learn, and we're going to start not feeling as though we're being selfish about putting ourselves on the A list, because we deserve to be on the A list, and we are going to change how we look at aging.
But Beth, I would argue it's the very same reason now that we know in the last 10 years, all the things that we've really learned about health, 10,000 steps a day. What are the right things to eat? What is good sleep hygiene? The pillars, right, of good health is part of the reason that our lifespans are so much longer. And part of the reason that menopause cannot be this sort of end of life conversation.
I agree.
We're living longer. So now, of course, menopause is in the forefront of this conversation. And of course, Gen X is the one to do it. We are the generation that is literally benefiting from all of the science around our health. We're not going to make menopause a period. We're going to make it a semicolon.
I know, that's right. I love that.
That needs to be a t-shirt.
It needs to be a t-shirt. It needs to be a t-shirt. So I would be remiss, though, that if I didn't be a little bit of a fly in the ointment around the science and the research and how far we've come, and to remind us that there are also systemic barriers to folk all being able to access.
I agree.
right?
Oh,
So, and you know, it's not lost on me, Beth, that you are a registered nurse and the CEO of your company, because the relationship I have, my mom was a registered nurse. And so the relationship I have with nurses feels very different than the relationship I have with doctors.
Right.
So if I had another magic wand, bippity boppity boop, the training that our healthcare providers receive when they're in medical school or in nursing school to be able to support aging bodies, transforming bodies, menopausal bodies would increase exponentially. And it would be a holistic, whole body kind of situation. It would not just be like, I'm only going to focus on your uterus and your ovaries and your estrogen levels. It's like, we are focusing on your whole body, this whole body experience, your full personhood from soup to nuts.
Yep.
And so I would want that to be the case. And also there would be a incentive and affirmation and support and leadership development of people who are actual menopause practitioners.
Right.
So in the same way we've seen the uptick in doulas, and the same thing we've seen the uptick in midwifery and the uptick in lactation consultants, and we would see an uptick in folk who are specifically supporting menopausal people as healthcare providers, menopause doulas, whatever the case may be. Right. And so there is an opportunity to transform institutions in the way that the medical industrial complex approaches teaching and supporting menopausal people.
And I think that's also legislation.
Absolutely.
We need to take a look at policy. And absolutely, to Omi's point, this idea that we are benefiting, or some of us are benefiting from this like new knowledge about health, is absolutely something that should be available to everyone. You should never have to pay for that information. And again, even if you're uninsured, or if you're working within like very strict parameters of an insurance company, what Omi was saying about take the three things, right? Dr. Jen Gunter, who wrote the Menopause Manifesto, said something very similar to me. She also said, write down all the things that are bothering you, not just the three biggies, right? Write down all of them, from worst issue that is bothering you the most, all the way to the most minuscule. Because even though most doctors will never have enough time to go through that laundry list with you, if you're tackling those three big things, it may affect some of the smaller issues, because there's so many issues in menopause that are interrelated to, due to decrease or fluctuation of hormones. So it's very important to kind of prioritize the things that you want to talk about when it comes to, whether it's mood or it's physical. If you can really identify the three biggies, they have a tendency to affect some of the other things that might be smaller.
I agree.
Ladies, what a delight. I'm first of all, I'm starstruck with both of you on my screen here. And I just want to thank you both for your time and for your energy, and for really being the pillars that are going to change the way women and age, right? How we age, how we perceive aging. We are going to embrace aging, and we are going to change the whole aging process for women. And
Amen.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I want to thank my Healthy Women audience for joining us today for another conversation on Women Talk. Join us for our next episode of Women Talk, when we're going to be talking about all things osteoporosis on October 19th.
I'll be there.
And thank you to our guests for your time and taking time out of your busy, crazy schedules. I so appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
I know. It's always great to see Omi and Beth. It was wonderful to talk to you. Thank you to you and Healthy Women.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Big fans of both of yours, and I look forward to continuing our conversation.
Me too.
Thank you, ladies. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Women Talk. Stay tuned for more Healthy Women live events at www.healthywomen.org. You can also follow us at Healthy Women on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or LinkedIn, or follow us on Instagram at HealthyWomen.org. We'll see you next time.